culture, politics, and whatever else. And we're going to be joined by a king of whatever else, Michael Moynihan, host of the Moynihan Report, co-host of the Fifth Column, one of the most fascinating interlocutors today. That's not just me saying that. I think that is an objective fact. But first, we start with Blue Sky going all in on sports. Yes, I know. I associate Blue Sky with ideology, with politics. I don't associate them with sports. But they're going all in on it, according to this article from Harvard's Nieman Lab. I don't know why Harvard has a lab that does articles, but that's a different conversation. The progressive competitor to Twitter, X, has made sports penetration a top priority. No. They've made it the top priority of all things. They're trying to hone in on the digital sports bar effect that Twitter has, and they are teaming up with my old employer, The Athletic, to do it. They're doing some sort of push notification thing to try to shepherd more sports content, and people will like sports all in one place. And I just find this very interesting. You know, ideological questions aside, I have to ask what Blue Sky has going for it over Twitter X. And I guess one thing is that they don't throttle their links. This is a problem for journalists on Twitter X, is that they don't really try to get people to go to wherever your link is. They want to keep everybody in the walled garden. And Blue Sky is promising journalists a more journalism forward environment where people will go to your content. But here's the problem. And I say this as a journo. I say it as a journo. We're not cool. That's the problem. We are not cool. You know what signified Twitter's entrance into the zeitgeist in 2009? It's when Shaquille O'Neal joined it. Yes, Shaq, not Mike Lupica or Jeff Pearlman or whatever sports writer I might come up with. It's athletes who are the cool mimetic models. And I think this is the obstacle for Blue Sky as I see it. They've attracted a population of journalists, self-selected of a certain vantage. Now, they can be correct in a lot of their assessments about Twitter, but you're self-selecting the people most animated by it to get into their own little bubble and hector and scold. And I don't think the athletes want that environment. And that's not to say athletes are super political, but they just want a big audience and easy access to that audience. That audience is going to be bigger on Twitter X, at least for now. So why would they change and why would they shift? I don't think you could really say that they love the politics of Blue Sky either. Again, I don't think the athletes are super political, but this is a big dog that didn't bark. I can't name one male athlete, prominent male athlete under 30, who endorsed Kamala Harris in the last election. I can name quite a few who endorsed Donald Trump. So I don't think that the sports media people have the same leanings as the athletes do, and I think the athletes are key. And I will stop monologuing eventually and bring on our brilliant guest, but I just want to say one thing about why I find this especially interesting. And it's this. I think for a platform to have political power, the apolitical are key to it. And that might sound like a paradox, but really think about it and go with me on this. If Twitter X got so ideologically siloed that literally only super MAGA people were on it, it would lose its ability to influence, because the name of the game is converting the unconverted. And I think between 2012 and 2022, when Twitter had a different political outlook, I saw a lot of people changing their politics and their focus in the direction that was most salient on the medium. It's similar to when I'm watching a lot of football and all of a sudden I want pizza because I've seen approximately 100 Papa John's advertisements. So I think for Blue Sky to matter and have an influence similar to the old Twitter in converting people to, let's say, a more progressive perspective, it does need those normies. It does need those unconverted people in the room. That's the only way it can happen, in my opinion. But let's bring on Michael Moynihan to discuss with me. Maybe he'll tell me I'm wrong. Maybe he'll tell me I'm missing something. We've got a great topic docket. We're going to talk about people being crazy about Epstein. We're going to talk about whether libertarians should feel a certain way about sports gambling, whether Superman has always been woke, Michael. There's a lot. Oh, and we're talking about how they finally made a Barbie for you. I mean, there's a lot.
They did.
Yeah.
I've been, I think the phrase, Ethan, is that I feel seen at this point. I haven't been seen.
Yeah.
But there is now and we can get to this later because it's probably
Yes.
not the most important topic, but there is now a type 1 diabetic Barbie. So
Yes.
as a type 1 diabetic, I'm very happy because now I can both collect dolls as a 50-year-old man and one that represents my horrible congenital disease. But someone just said in the comment that is Chairman Mao behind me to the great producer Trace. Yeah, the thing about Blue Sky is I haven't used it because I don't, everything I see about it makes me not want to use it.
Yeah.
All the problems with Twitter that arose, I mean, all the problems were there before, but they really kind of solidified when Elon took over. And, when Grok becomes like a electronic David Irving in the past week, and it was like denying the Holocaust. It's like, what the hell? I don't know what was happening, by the way. I just keep on seeing this, and I missed it for that day that people were asking Grok things, and it was like Nazis are great. So I missed this moment. But so there's a lot of problems with Elon. I was just muted, I think. Was that
Thank God. I thought that was me. My
no,
heart
no, no, no.
stopped.
It was like the censorship. There's so
Ah,
much
yes.
censorship here. I was going for places that your producer didn't want me to go.
Don't look now.
Um,
Chairman Mao is sitting just to your right. He may have reached over and
yes,
flicked it.
yes,
Oh my God.
he is
That
somebody who, well, actually, the thing about that Chairman Mao is someone bought it for me and they thought it was small. And it came in an enormous, like Indiana Jones crate. You had to
mm,
like pry open and Mao was in it. Um, but this house is full of communist
of course. Uh-oh. He's censored again, folks. Can I unmute him? Is that possible?
What is happening with the muting? I'm
Oh,
so tired of being throttled by this show.
mhm. Yeah, they
But
didn't understand that you're actually going to allege that there is no Epstein conspiracy. The conspiracists thought that
yeah,
you were going to unveil them later, but really you're all part of it. Um, I will let you make your point. If the
yes,
powers that be will allow it, then I will let you
yeah,
make your
yeah. If they
point.
won't, I mean, they probably won't. This is the country we live in now, Ethan. And by the way, my hands are here, so I'm not muting myself. Um, no, I think Twitter is still useful. I don't tweet though. I
Mm,
use it. I used to tweet all the time, and so
yeah.
I have a normal, I guess, decent number of Twitter followers, but I don't ever. I mean, not ever. I very rarely tweet. I just because I don't like the responses. I don't like interacting with people, and I don't like seeing all the craziness because
Yeah.
I always have the instinct to respond, despite the
Mm,
fact that I know it's some guy in a on break from working at Papa John's or something, and he's like trying to provoke me. I'm very easy to provoke, so I try.
yeah.
I don't look at the replies to anything that I've ever tweeted. But I do find it useful for other stories. I mean, there's a lot of stuff as far as the speed of it. As a journalist, the number of things, particularly stuff on other media platforms. So, Tucker Carlson's going to talk to the president of Iran. And I know, I don't want to watch this, but I know that somebody I trust or have, I think is a decent journalist will watch it and then highlight the bits that I think I probably should know
Yeah.
about. Yeah, that's what it's good for. But the Blue Sky thing is interesting because I said to myself, like, oh, well, maybe I'll get on that platform. It's kind of a left leaning thing. This is kind of a right leaning thing. Balance it out. It actually seems crazier than, and the reason it seems crazier to me is that all the crazy people on X, like there's so many Nazis and anti Semites and things like that, are people that everyone understands are crazy. And they're
Mm,
so crazy, in fact, that they won't use their own names. The craziness on Blue Sky seems to be people in academia and people in journalism who get together and block Jesse Singal. That
yeah.
seems to be the main activity of people on Blue Sky. So, yeah, it didn't seem like my type of thing. If they're going to go into sports, seems like, I don't want to indulge in any stereotypes here, but it seems bizarre to me that the place that is obsessed with knocking Jesse Singal off the platform is going to be really interested in the NHL draft or something. It just seems
Hey,
like two
they
different
say
audiences to me, but what do I
they
know?
got a bump in activity, they say, during the finals and during the NHL finals. And I always then go, well, compared to what? It
Yeah, well,
seems like they're
exactly. Yeah,
they're
yeah.
losing subscribers. There was an exodus of sports journos, but it does highlight the topic I'm fascinated by, which is this misalignment. And yeah, my assumption on Blue Sky, which I don't use, is that 50% of the tweets are complaining about our friend Jesse. I just did a search and I started searching my own name and going, oh, Jesus, I shouldn't have done that. Apparently
Oh,
people are
really?
talking to, well, people like journalists, people I might see tomorrow when I fly to Summer League in Las
Seriously,
Vegas.
what are they like sports journalists?
Yeah,
What
sports
are they
journalists.
saying? Give me an example.
I don't know. They're mad about something I wrote, or they say this or that, you know, the type of thing. Woe is me, so sad. But yeah, I'm not in touch with that world.
No.
And I'm very much believe it when I see it because there's been a lot of, oh, here comes Blue Sky. Here's the Blue Sky drum roll. Howard Beck, who I know and like quite a bit, but he's somebody who's very animated by what he doesn't like about Twitter and he sees in its political leanings. He's really trying to get a lot of the other journalists on there. He's a former Lakers and Knicks beat writer currently at The Ringer. And so I try to keep an open mind. I try to go, okay, maybe this will be a thing. And I don't see it escaping its ideological valence. And I don't think it can be big enough to actually influence ideology, ironically, without escaping it and becoming something that seems neutral. It's just always going to be that counterpoint to Twitter, which is always going to have a political signal to it.
Yeah, I mean the thing about I have a Tesla and I bought the Tesla long before Elon got particularly political. And if you're driving somewhere and you have to stop at a Tesla supercharger station, you will still see people that have stickers on their car that say, I bought this Tesla before Elon went crazy. And it's like the politicization of everything is like, you know, I bought this Ford after I realized that Henry Ford published the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. You know, I mean, there's like, I don't care about
Brock convinced me to buy this Ford is the
yeah. This is my Nazi car, Ford Volkswagen. I didn't know it was a Nazi car when I bought it. I mean, you can go down these, like, this is the thing about, you know, people complaining that we all live in our little silos these days. Okay. The people that I've heard complain about that have left Twitter for Blue Sky. One person in particular that I remember having this conversation with. And it's like, well, aren't you encouraging those silos by going somewhere else and just saying, well, let's leave that to the crazy people? I'll tell you what, I like, you know, it's very, very different than changing the channel between MSNBC and CNN. It's both on the same cable box that's on your same television. Why people have chosen Blue Sky over Twitter. And look, I think that the problems that some people denied that Twitter was going through when Elon Musk took over, it's kind of impossible to deny them now. I mean, the number of like wild, insane, racist, primarily anti-Semitic, by the way. The racist accounts I don't see very much. The anti-Semitic ones, because of that valence of politics, it's like it's actually about Israel. It's actually about AIPAC. It's actually about you know, the influence of Israel in American politics. And then you click on their things, and they're like, you know, well, now the likes are hidden, but retweeting stuff from like actually anti-Semitic accounts. So that stuff really, really came out of the woodwork. But I think a lot of the coverage of that, you know, it reminded me of when I shot something for the Vice show on Showtime, from HBO to Showtime. And it was the beginning of the pandemic. And we went and shot something in Times Square, and there was no one there. It was 9 a.m. It was peak shutdown. And we're shooting, and every time I'm doing like a piece to camera, walking, shooting, some like homeless guy would come out and start talking like, hey, I'm like, dude, can you just relax? And then I was like, man, there's so many homeless people here. And then I realized, oh no, there's no people here. So now the only people you see are the homeless people. Like, that's what X is to me. It used to be so many journalists, so many people, like there were organizations, NPR, et cetera. I think it was NPR, who said, we'll no longer put our news out on this platform, because this platform is run by a crazy person and it has crazy politics, et cetera. Yeah, when all those people went away, all the other lunatics were kind of rising and filling all that For You tab. You know, it's like, it has to keep going. I mean, the For You in the past was not a little, you know, just like one thing an hour. It was just like an endless stream of things. And now I used to get, you know, all sorts of journalists who are no longer on Twitter. I just wish they would come back, because maybe because Elon's attacking MAGA now.
So this is interesting right here. I talked about an exodus of sports writers. I should clarify, some people, because I heard similar stuff from Katie Herzog when we talked about this issue about a half year ago, and she's describing Twitter to me and what's going on there. And I use Twitter every day. Well, really, I consume it. I prefer to consume rather than participate. I
Yeah,
want to
sure.
eat at
Yeah,
Chipotle. I don't want to get back there and actually
exactly.
produce the
Yeah, yeah.
metabolic tweets. But her view of it, and we forget this sometimes. I think we all are living in our own version of everybody voted for McGovern.
Yeah,
Her
exactly.
Twitter was not my Twitter. My
Yeah,
Twitter is mostly sports people talking sports stuff,
yeah.
and it's pretty much the same. The For You is bonkers, but the sports thing is pretty similar to what it was before. Not completely, not completely. And so that's interesting what you're telling me, that there has been such an exodus that it has elevated the
Yeah, for
wild street
sure.
person when it
Yeah,
comes to the
look,
political stuff.
and I think it's a really bad thing. I don't like that. Let's all be in our little silos. But I just think look at the other parts of culture where that's happened, and particularly around 2020. On the last episode of the Fifth Column, I talked about a film that I went to see with my producer, Jason, called Eddington. That is coming out. The guy who made Midsummer, I
Oh
think it's
yeah.
coming out next week, and it's about a town fictional town called Eddington, New Mexico, in the town sheriff, and it takes place in May of 2020. So it's the first film about COVID lockdowns and about BLM. So there's the COVID lockdowns, it's this tension in the town, and then the George Floyd thing happens in those tensions, and then of course Ari Aster, the director, makes it go completely insane. And the completely insane thing is very funny and over the top, and people will either really hate the movie or really love the movie. But it was really interesting to be kind of travel back to those moments, and Jason and I were talking about it after, and talking about like that was just the insanity of it, combined with the fact that this was a virus that we couldn't be exposed to. We couldn't go outside. We had to be 6 feet apart until it was time to fight racism. And then everybody went out on the street after George Floyd, saying, well, racism is itself a pandemic. That was actually a line that you heard quite a bit, and from famous and successful people. But the reason I mentioned that time is that when everyone retreated into their corners, it was really bad for the country and really bad for everyone that I knew. Just broadly speaking, for companies that were like, everyone's backed away from that, right? Amazon would be like, click here if you want to sort by Hispanic owned companies or something. And they would have ads. That I had a Facebook ad that I saved that was just all trans people. It was fine. I don't give a shit about trans people. It's not an issue that I care about. It's not an issue that we ever talk about in the show. I don't have a lot of politics around it, but it is weird when you're like, oh, they're doing something here that is very particularly of the moment, au courant and political. Yeah. That really has gone away. And so when I see Blue Sky and stuff, it's journalists, because they're not trying to make money, right? So Amazon, they will react like, okay, nobody likes this. If Disney is only making these kind of woke type movies and nobody likes them, that they'll move on from that. The politics aren't going to subsume the bottom line, but moving to a different platform doesn't make a difference to anyone, right? It doesn't make, you're not losing any money doing it. You're just speaking to people in your own corner. And I think that these seem to be the only people that are still in that mindset of that, let's play over here. Now, you can say the same thing is true about MAGA, but they've always been like that. It's always been that conservatives think the mainstream hates them, so they have to make and build their own institutions.
Yeah.
Whereas in this case, I think that the politicization of Bud Light, of Amazon, of Google, of the Google Doodle being, political, I think we're on the other side of that in a lot of ways. And the Blue Sky thing is like the one place where I see it's journalists. So when everyone says, oh, wokeness is dead, that moment is over, it's like, well, yeah, unless you're in media or work at a university. In corporations, it's sort of over, but for the rest of us in this world, less so.
Yeah, it's complicated because something shifted. There was a vibe shift, but
sure.
It's not completely and it's not everywhere.
No.
And you can be on Earth too, like in the WNBA, that is still as though all of this stuff is going as strong as it ever was. But then in other sectors, you're not seeing it. And I think it's that moment of 2012 to 2022. I don't know, we call it wokeness. Some people will really roll their eyes and reject that kind of label. Wokeness is weird that way. It's almost like It's almost like hipsterism, where suddenly
Yeah.
there are a bunch of hipsters, but nobody's a hipster.
No, yeah, exactly.
So
Yes,
we
that's
kind of know
right.
what we're talking about, but it was this thing that will, I hope, in the future just be impossible to describe to my children, of what it was like during these days where people just all were animated about the same thing and were all hopped up about it, and it would just switch all the time and they would have the same amount of fervor every time, and it just completely consumed the discourse in that way. We've moved past that. I do think that's true, but now it's just a more fractured time, and it's hard to even know what the mainstream perspective is. You used to be kind of beaten over the head with what the mainstream perspective is. Now, I don't know. And maybe this is a decent segue that you brought up the COVID time, because we're
Mm,
going to talk about loss of trust and people in silos,
yeah.
and the outsider becoming the insider is this story right here. I think that we'll have a little criticism for all political sides. You, I hear, are quite amused by how Trump world is absorbing the Epstein
It's the
situation
greatest.
now that they're ruling over it and
Oh, I
effectively
love it.
saying that kind of can't find anything right here. I think this is a good topic for us. I'm
It's
not sure
amazing.
why,
It's
but I
one
think
of
it's a
my
good topic.
favorite things of all time. I mean, I thought one of those brilliant moves, political, jerk moves, was Elon Musk saying that Donald Trump is in the Epstein files, and therefore it just sent everyone's head spinning. They're like, "Wait, what?
Yeah.
Donald Trump?" And it's just like he's sitting there laughing. It's like you have to kind of like the people who are. It's so easy to get these people riled up in these things, but the way they look at it, which is great. There's two ways of looking at this. Number one is the most obvious. Occam's razor suggests that on this particular issue, the people in Trump world made stuff up because it's what their base wanted and it's what they liked, right? So they say, oh, it goes so deep and there's all these files, and when we get in there, we're going to release the files, the JFK files and the Epstein files. And then they get in there, and the greatest thing is, now they're going to be called on the bullshit. And when you're called on the bullshit, the conspiracy theorists think, oh no, it got to them too. I sent you this joke, this famous joke of the person who dies and goes to heaven and is at the pearly gates and says to God says, you have one question I can answer, and he says, who killed JFK? And God says, Lee Harvey Oswald from the Texas School Book Depository. And the person says, Jesus Christ, it goes all the way to the top. And that's the kind of thing. It's like once you're inside and you're like, okay, well, I was just part of this movement, in part of the kind of rhythm of this movement, part of, how you are in it is you have to believe in this stuff or talk about them. Kash Patel, you can find videos of him saying, oh, when we get to this, we're gonna blow the lid off of Dan Bongino. And they're both like, yeah, there's really nothing. And I don't think they ever thought that they would have to come and pay those bills, right? I mean, it's just, you usually can say this stuff, ad infinitum, and you can't. The thing about conspiracy theories is they just can't be fact checked, in the sense that my producer once, when I went to Texas to interview Alex Jones, and I had this German producer who said, like, what is he going to what you're going to say when he does, like, when he responds in this way? And I was like, you know what? You can't. And the reason you can't is because they make things up. And of course, what happened was I said, Alex, that's wrong. He's like, oh, Michael, I've got a document here. I talked to somebody on the inside, and they just make shit up. It's endless. And I'll give credit to somebody who I've been very, very critical of. The journalist Michael Tracy has a story about this Epstein stuff in Compact, that sort of, national conservative, paleo conservative Sohrab Ahmari magazine, which is very, very good. And he's like, you guys have just been fooled by all of this stuff because you want it to be true.
Yes.
And the reason people want this stuff to be true is a couple of things. It suggests that what they've said for a very long time about the quote unquote deep state is real. This is all part of the deep state. This is all part of these people way up there. And what do they love? What are they obsessed with? Pedophile rings. And this is a pedophile ring protecting the powerful. Now, there's other people who run into this vacuum too and get sucked into it. And those are the people who are obsessed with Israel, right? I mean, Jeffrey Epstein's Jewish.
Well, you're the people looking for puppeteers, I guess.
Correct.
I hadn't even thought about the connection between the two, but yeah, there is a lot of overlap in that. And maybe I can connect it to my concept that I'm never going to get to catch on. I've renamed it per a reader suggestion. I said moral inertia last time we talked. I'm going to call it
Yeah.
moral momentum,
Yeah.
where you start with an inclination and you just keep doubling down to justify it to the point where you start sounding insane. So we talked about COVID earlier, loss of trust in institutions. There's a lot of there's been a reveal while we've been using Twitter of what big idiots so many formerly esteemed, credentialed people are. You start calling that out and you start saying, yeah, these people, they're not great. The people running and ruling us, they're not great. Okay. It's like, actually, they're really bad. They might even be evil. Like, okay. You know what? They're all fucking children. They're all doing that. It's like, whoa, like you're taking it to this place where you start with this bad inclination and you keep kind of spinning it up and amplifying it. I don't know if these people you're mentioning actually convince themselves of it or if they know they're lying about it. I don't know, but I'll say this, and this might seem like a bit of a quasi name drop, but the business that I've been in, because sports involves a lot of billionaires and attracts a lot of powerful people. I am not such a person, but I am in conversation with them. I don't think they're involved in pedophile rings. I'm just going to say that. I know that's controversial. Maybe one is, maybe one. I don't know. But
rings in general are pretty hard to establish, particularly, when there are a bunch of famous people doing terrible things. Because there's a lot of incentive to people around those rings to blow the whistle and make a lot of money on it.
Yeah. It's just also people have morality. And I think it's this view of if you're at the top, you must be completely depraved. And actually, when you meet people of that status, they're people. I mean, some are very impressive, some are really unlikable, but they are people. And I think most people would never want to be engaged in anything like that. And so that view that that's what it's like, maybe it's comforting in a certain way that there's this sort of order, but I mean, I've got to be careful.
And by the way, just to quickly say this, Ethan, I want to make sure before people jump on me for it, is that Jeffrey Epstein was a phenomenal piece of shit. Was guilty of a lot of the things he was accused of. But what ends up happening, by the way, in these situations is that when you have Harvey Weinstein is a good example of this, absolute moral monster, and a monster in a million levels. But if there's 5 people that come forward, the next 5 people, it doesn't mean that they're telling the truth, right? There's incentive for people to get involved in this story, is that if a random guy who owns the hardware store in your town, if 48 people come forward and say, he attacked me, you're like, oh, that's very convincing. Those numbers are worrying, right? And you say, there's a lot of smoke here. There's definitely a fire. When somebody like Jeffrey Epstein, where there's like the 5 people where you actually know what they're saying is true, you have a lot of evidence, and we're just dealing with evidence here. There's going to be then a lot of incentive to make that story a little bigger. So the woman who is Victoria Giuffria or whatever, who died a couple of last month, this woman has been the linchpin of a lot of these stories, and she's backed away from some of them. And some of them are just so outrageous and so outlandish that you start wondering, say, like, what is happening here? What is the incentive for a lot of these people to say, no, I mean, I was raped on a plane by Bill Clinton and they filmed it and all this stuff. There are a lot of crazy stories like that out there. And you see these, people having these conversations. They take all of this stuff as being true because someone said it. Because someone said it, and because Jeffrey Epstein is a bad guy who committed crimes, it doesn't mean the thing that person just said is true. It means we should look into it. It's not like, a random person being accused. There's a lot of incentive there to investigate that and say what's going on. But you see this stuff because they were Bill Clinton on the plane. And like, where are the flight logs? Well, no, you told us there were flight logs. Well, I'll tell you something that is certainly true. If there are planes that go into a place, I presume there are flight logs. And if those are uncovered, do you know what it means? It means there are people that went on a plane. That's all it means. That's all the evidence shows. Do you want to look further? Go ahead. That's great. That's what we do as journalists. But this sense that all of this stuff, I'll tell you what, this is the thing that people can't get into their heads. And I've been attacked for this, and people have sent me
Oh, he got muted right as he said that.
Oh,
Right as
yeah.
he said that.
Right as I said that, it's like Epstein is still alive and he's
Yeah.
on a computer somewhere muting me. But the thing about this, I've said this before and people get mad about it, but it is true. People like hanging around rich people. Full stop. Very rich people.
Yeah.
People say, well, why did they go to the islands? Because it's a fucking island. And the guy has a plane. Why is he on the plane? It's the only reason they're there is not to sacrifice children. It's because a rich guy is going to fly you to an island on a plane. That every one of these people is on the log who have admitted to knowing Jeffrey Epstein or going places are ideologically very diverse. Noam Chomsky spent a lot of time with Jeffrey Epstein, and he told people, fuck off, when they asked him. The Wall Street Journal asked him, and he's like, you know what? I don't want to talk about this. Is Noam Chomsky an agent of Israel? The man who spent his entire life shitting on Israel? I mean, this stuff makes
that's the
zero
greatest
sense.
trick the Shin Bet and Mossad ever pulled.
Exactly. But it was,
Investing
was
60
making-
years or so into Noam Chomsky, the last living person that I always conceived of as old. But anyway,
yes,
sorry.
yeah, and he looks really old now. He looks like Gandalf at this point. He's very long white beard and everything. But this stuff, it drives me crazy because the actual story is bad enough, and people try to make it worse, and they undermine their own credibility. You know, I think I sent you this video. I think a chain that we were on today. This video that had 1 million views in 10 hours. Some random guy sitting in front of a camera saying, "This is the greatest scandal in history." And I was watching it and I realized that you would think this was the greatest scandal in human history if you understood nothing about journalism, if you understood nothing about, you know, how investigations work. I pointed this out the other day, these people saying that there's redactions everywhere. Well, yes, of course there are redactions everywhere. That's what happens when you have other victims and people that they've talked to, they get redacted. When you unspool that black mark there, it might be a woman who talked to an investigator about some sexual activity between her and somebody on Epstein's Island that maybe was illegal or was not illegal. She was of age and she wasn't of age. Money changed hands or it didn't. But they will black out her name. And people who don't know the most basic things about this see this and they think it's Operation Mongoose. They think it's like oh my God, they're covering it up. This is the same thing about the JFK files. And I'm going to ask people just to think one thing. And then I'm sorry, I'll stop ranting. You just be logical about things. When you're logical about, did Building 7, was it wired by a demolition team? Just be logical about that for a second, right? And start thinking about the mechanics of how that happens and how you keep silent and the rest of it. If you think there's a document in the National Archives that will reveal the truth about the JFK assassination, just be logical for a second and think, these people who, you know, foment coups against the American government, murder one of its most popular, young, telegenic, good-looking, wonderful speaker, that leader with a very powerful family, incidentally, they're just going to leave a document inside the archives that's going to unfold this whole thing. But you know what they're going to do? They figured it out. There's a document there. Let's just classify it. Let's just make sure it's not released, not set it on fire, not do it. You keep on thinking of the logic of this stuff. Epstein was murdered. You know, if you live in New York City and you see how anything functions in New York City, whether it's the MTA or the friggin' jails, people say, whoa, they must have gotten in and you know, in this 1 minute that was off on that video they released, the news story today, it was edited in Premiere. It's like, yeah, they said they were going to kind of denoise it and brighten it, and they did that in Premiere. This was a story from Wired today, feeding this conspiracy that, you know, the guy who tried to kill himself 2 weeks before. And why would he kill himself? I don't know. He's an old man who's the most hated person on earth and going to prison for the rest of his life. Kind of seems logical to me. But people aren't logical. They love the stories, particularly when the stories tell them something about their worldview. And that's the MAGA thing right now. It tells them something about their worldview.
I wish I didn't have a heart out. I want to explore everything. And even though we are at risk of talking a lot of Epstein, I do want to keep talking about it as I narrate my own thoughts. There's something, I got to be careful with how I choose my words here. But I think the conspiracy theorists are sometimes at risk of making their adversaries seem so competent that they should run things.
Correct.
And I'm not saying that if the conspiracy theorists are correct on this, that it would be justified or you'd literally want people running such an island to run things. But I'm reminded of the 2020 election.
Yeah.
And that election happens. And from the MAGA side, there are all these accusations of fraud and it was stolen and everything else. And you know what? That was a crazy time. All of a sudden, we were doing vote by mail by the tens of millions. I would have been open to hearing evidence. I would have been open to hearing, hey, maybe there's something here. But increasingly, over a short period of time, it became obvious that they really didn't have anything. And then you double down from that perspective. The whole it goes all the way to the top sort of thinking.
Mhm.
And then at that point, I was thinking, you know what? If the Democratic Party, which in my view is not any kind of model of competence and efficiency, was able to steal this election while leaving effectively no evidence behind, you know what? I guess they're right. I guess they have a right to rule. I guess that's a demonstration of competence.
Yes.
I'm not literally saying that, but there is something to that when you become a
yeah.
conspiracy theorist in that way, where you're building up your adversary, an adversary that doubtless has many flaws and can be criticized from 1,000 different directions. And in excoriating them in this heavy moral tone, you're also propping them up and making them sound amazingly proficient, the kind of proficiency you only see in movies.
Yeah, I mean, the proficiency, I mean, basically what it has to rely on is a bunch of tiny bits of false information that enter the conversation at some point and then become facts without anyone questioning them. And one of the great examples of this is your phenomenal producer a long time ago worked at Vice. I did too. And how does everybody know that Vice was a $5 billion company? It was a privately held company. You know, Disney opened the books to it and said, well, we're not going to pay $5 billion for this because you guys have been bullshitting. But in journalism, what happens is this. One person decides to be credulous and report the thing that Shane Smith said, the CEO of Vice. And all you need then is you have your source. It was in the Wall Street Journal. And then everybody after that says it's a $5 billion company, a $6 billion company. No evidence. Nobody's ever looked at those books and said that that's true, but it became true because enough people said it. And this is the thing about the Epstein client list. I mean, there's been some people, like interesting journalists, who have been like, where did this come from? And what does a client list mean, by the way? Does it mean people he's given quote unquote tax advice to? Yes, there's something very dodgy about that. And I have interacted, by the way, so maybe I'm involved in it too, with the person who paid that money for tax advice, Leon Black, through, you know, you're in journalism, you have connections to everyone. You ultimately meet these people.
This is getting interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah.
Where did Vice get the billions of dollars?
Yeah, maybe it was the Mossad or something. But that thing, the client list. Okay, what does the client list mean? Because people start repeating it, like, oh, the client list. They have to release the client list. I mean, is it people who are his friends? So there's another document I saw, which someone put on Twitter, and like, well, this was buried, and first it wasn't buried in the documents. It was photocopies of Jeffrey Epstein's address book, and it was like, look at the names. He has people's phone numbers. Like, are you really going to go that far and say all of these people have paid for underage sex or something? None of this stuff. So you start saying these things endlessly. The client list, the flight logs, which, by the way, even if they existed, the flight logs, of course, exist. Flight logs exist. A client list for what? Of people who paid him to procure girls? Okay, that would be really explosive. And then the rot would be so deep if multiple prosecutions decided we're not going to touch the powerful. Do you understand how this fucking game works? Do you understand that if myself, Ethan, whoever, it's not a paranoid 70s movie like with, you know, Robert Redford running from a rogue CIA who's trying to kill him, right? What it is if you find out that Bill Clinton is paying money, writing checks, whatever, and you're a journalist, hello, your new career. Hello, Woodward and Bernstein 2.0. You think there aren't journalists who are not looking through stuff, prosecutors who are not looking through stuff, and would be like, oh, I'm going to make my name now. You don't think people just like, I want to be nice to Bill Clinton and his dotage. Get out of here. I mean, it's absolute madness that people think, and again, to be very clear, the very, very bad stuff that the government accused Jeffrey Epstein of seems to be very true. Very, very true. I think there's some sort of plumping up of it here and there. But this idea right now, it means a lot to a lot of people because it means a lot to say that there's the deep state and then there's the child sex rings and they're protecting the powerful. And now Donald Trump saying, why are you talking about Epstein all the time? By the way, totally sensible thing to say. people being washed away in Texas, and they're like, well, what about the flight logs? It's like the guy's dead. You know, the main accuser just died. I mean, it's just a wild thing. And you have to ask yourself, like, why are people so obsessed with this? Beyond the fact that it's fun. I know people think it's fun.
I mean, I saw some people in the conservative media landscape saying Trump's really messing up with his base with this. You know,
Yeah.
he's not in touch with the base on. Well, if they don't have anything, what do?
Yeah.
Roust people and put them
Yeah.
on trial to satisfy the base? But
Exactly.
we're living in the world where maybe the conspiracy theory is untrue, but if other people are living in the world where it's obviously true, then they're going to have assumptions on the basis of that. I will say, you guys can ask questions. We want them to be a little bit on topic, and you can't be, because we're
I
talking
mean,
Epstein.
Ethan, we're not really on topic, so
We're not. That's true. I just say you can't be too crazy. Like you can't
well, you
be
can be crazy. That's fine.
okay.
Be crazy. I don't care. That's
Okay.
good.
Well, I'll let Trace call up Jack Long, and we'll take a question from Aaron after that, and then we will proceed with other topics such as sports gambling. Jack, how you
Yeah,
doing?
there's a sports gambler.
Good.
Sorry.
First of all, on behalf of South Florida, Michael, I would like to thank you for sending us Brad Marchand.
Oh, no. I think that you mentioning his name, I have a 14-year-old daughter who saw a woman in a Marchand t-shirt when we were in Massachusetts, and I had to restrain her. She was about to go stab her. And not only that is a Stanley Cup performance that is outrageous. I mean, an amazing Stanley Cup performance. He's 37 years old. Good Lord. Bad. And what did we get for it, Jack? I mean, we as Bostonians.
Well, you get a first-round pick in a couple of years.
In a couple of years. It's not even right away. Good Lord. Bad move. But congratulations again for the Panthers.
Yeah. Anyway, the question I have for Ethan, and I guess Michael, you can also get on it, is what's your favorite sports conspiracy?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question.
I mean, I got to go with the classic, the frozen envelope, Patrick Ewing going to the Knicks. I love that. There's so much conspiracy theorizing about the NBA draft in particular. And it's similar dynamics, Michael, even if the stakes are not so high. A lot of people really believe that the NBA draft is rigged, even today. And when you really try to game it out and be logical about it, it's impossible. You couldn't actually do that, but people do want to believe. And I think the origins of it, the godfather of these conspiracies vis-a-vis the NBA draft, is the Patrick Ewing draft. I enjoyed watching Patrick Ewing when I was a kid. My dad's a big Knicks fan. I'm going with that one. I can't think. What are the other ones?
I'm trying to think of the other ones.
Put on the spot. What are the
Jack,
other?
do you have one that's a favorite?
So the one I keep coming back to, and again, it does sort of go into Epstein territory, and I'm not sure how real it is, but if you look into the Jerry Sandusky situation, there's the first prosecutor, and I believe 97, 98 was this guy Ray Griccar, who just disappeared.
Huh.
And the last thing they found on his work search history was how to destroy a laptop hard drive. And they just never found his body. They never found anything. And it's that's the one thing where it's I mean, I think more likely than not he just jumped off a bridge, but that's the rabbit hole I keep coming down.
Well, Jack, I don't know if you know this journalist. I'm trying to remember his name, but I'll think of it in a second. But he's a guy that went really deep on the Paterno Sandusky stuff.
Oh, I think
you know what I'm talking about? And he was like, it's actually some of this stuff is bullshit. And this is look, what happens with a lot of them. I mean, the Epstein thing's very similar, is that there is a real thing here and a real bad thing. And then all of a sudden, everybody gets sucked into this turbine. And because we enjoy the story, because it's so fun to talk about, and it's so fun to do that God, what is his name? He's on Twitter all the time, but he's an interesting guy. I think he's like a conservative guy too. And he was like, no, a lot of this stuff is just either not true or really, really thinly sourced in the whole Penn State universe. So yeah, I don't know I'll find his name and mention it, but he's really interesting.
Jack, great stuff. I'm going to bounce you out. I'm going to ask a question of Michael, and then we have other topics that we're going to get to, but honestly, some of you have been so patient. I do want to we might just end up answering your questions instead. We're going with the flow. The question I have for you, Michael, to put you on the spot,
Oh no.
because you're an anti-conspiracy theorist-ist in a way, and I think we share that. I like that. I like the sort of debunking of what people like to talk about as this, there's something shady here, and you'll present the evidence and go, no, it's what it seems like. Gun to your head, if you have to choose a conspiracy theory as most likely to be true, what do you pick?
Oh no, this is the one that gets you in a lot of trouble.
I've got I'll give you an example. I'll throw one out there that I give.
Yeah. There's ones that I want to be true. But yeah.
I would say the killing of bin Laden is a little fishy. I'm sure there's a reason for it. But that they dumped him in the ocean and they never said where, I think is weird. I'm sure they've got their reasons.
I mean, what do you want them to have a fucking ceremony downtown where you bury him? I mean, come on, throw him off a boat.
I'm just saying, I've never been aware of a situation where they killed a guy and they said within 24 hours, we've disposed of the body and we can't tell you where it is. Look, gun to my head though, I'm saying it's legit, but if I have to choose one, I might go bin Laden.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of things that I think of, like, you know, the history and historiography on certain issues is really wrong. And that's the stuff that I'm kind of interested in. The stuff that's become current wisdom. You know, like when Joe Biden pardoned Leonard Peltier. I once did a really deep dive into that and spent like a month reading everything. And I was like, oh, this guy's guilty. And that was like shocking to me. I was like, oh, because everybody had this. I grew up in Massachusetts. You know, I was in Western Mass. Everyone had the stickers like free Leonard Peltier and everything. So I don't have a lot of conspiracy theories that I think on the top of my head, but I have a lot of things that have become conventional wisdom that I think are probably not true. Yeah. And that being one of them. But yeah, my working assumption, I remember when Christopher Hitchens, you know, he hated that he did that book, Letters to a Young Contrarian. But it was a Letters to series, and he was asked to write this book. But he was like, I'm not a contrarian. I don't actively go out trying to debunk things. I just am honest, and my point of view is probably different than a lot of people's. So I don't like to be a debunker, but I think that what ends up happening is when you understand that people in power are dumb and incompetent, you can't have both of those thoughts in your head. Like, conservatives are like, you know, these people can't run government, yet they can orchestrate one of the most amazing, complicated conspiracies in human history. That stuff always shocks me. It's like, wait a second, how can they do both? How can they be so incompetent that they can't run a basic government agency to, you know, get you the most basic services, yet they can cover something up that requires the knowledge of hundreds of people? That's usually what I say. Just be logical about this stuff. So the conspiracy theory stuff, I never go out saying like, oh, none of them can be true, because there are conspiracies. Conspiracies exist. Real conspiracies actually exist, but they're almost always uncovered. But how would I know, right? How would I know?
And I will clarify, because I don't want Moynihan to think I'm crazy.
Yeah.
My version of conspiracy theories that are plausible bakes in the incompetence followed by a cover-up. I usually, if I have to go, oh, there might have been a fuck up. So my version, if we're forced to come up with a scenario where the bin Laden thing is fake, which again, I don't believe this, but if I have to pick one, if I'm forced to pick one, it would be they thought they were killing him. Oh, that's not the guy. Oh, I guess we got to run with it. That's the best. That's the best sort of far-fetched.
It was Steve Laden, his cousin, who lived in Pakistan.
We killed the body double. Yeah, he's been dead all the time.
The conspiracies that often, or the cover-ups that often turn out to be true, the motivations for them are almost always the same, which is to cover up personal incompetence and not cover up for some, puppeteer who's like making us all do X or Y. It's usually you look stupid. I mean, our agency looks dumb. Let's not talk about that. Let's kind of push that. And then when the CIA does that, and the CIA has done that quite a bit, by the way. And Eli Lake and I have talked about this. He's been doing this kind of thing on the deep state and what the deep state is, and is there a real deep state? And comes to the conclusion like, well, yeah, you could call this the deep state. And they do bad things, and oftentimes the reason is just rank incompetence and trying to save their jobs and their reputations.
That makes a tremendous amount of sense, but it's too banal to get people excited.
Correct.
So therefore, they don't want to choose to believe it. Let's get Aaron. Let's go lightning round. We're going to go quick. Aaron, what you got?
Quick thing, I just put it in the chat. The Navy has had a longstanding tradition of burial at sea, including enemy combatants.
I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear more.
Aaron,
of
he
the
doesn't want to hear
conspiracy.
your
Get him out of
facts.
here. I have my fun theory.
By the way, this includes, if you think of who were the biggest culturally terrorists prior to, like 9/11 type terrorists, which were kamikaze pilots in World War II. So
Yeah.
if you think that culturally, what that means, especially to the Navy and the Marine Corps, and even to American society.
Yeah.
So so not to zing on you. I'm just pointing out.
No, this is actually a good object example, because I think what happens, and to be clear, I'm not saying I believed this conspiracy, but I think people get embarrassed and they double down. So
Yeah.
somebody like Aaron presents the evidence, and instead of going, well, that makes a lot of sense and I sound stupid now, people then instead they just retreat further to.
I mean, I'm a big reader of the Decision Lab. I tell everyone read that once a year. They list all 350 biases that we have, and you just kind of pound yourself into the Decision Lab once a year. Just reevaluate your own biases, stupidity, and anchoring thinking, and it just clears your head a little. And I just do that all the time, or not all the time, but at least once a year. And you just find like you run across another biases, and you're like, oh, I did that one a few months ago. And so I'm a huge believer, like you are, Michael, in just the incompetence thesis for, pretty much almost 75% of human action.
Yeah, it usually works. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's just the Occam's razor. And it's just also like, these are the same morons that we and everyone else is around us and do everything wrong and screw up our dinner appointment and everything else. So why would that not, grow all the way to the more complex type events? So I'm wondering, though, you asked a question about sports conspiracies. I do think, and so I grew up in Pasadena. I have a good friend of mine, Stacey Augmon, that played on the UNLV Rebels, and they were part of, obviously there was no real conspiracy, where people thought, because they were so overwhelming of a favorite, that there was a, conspiracy in 1991 in the loss to Duke, when they just got beat by Duke, is what it comes down to. And that became kind of this rolling theme. And of course, they had all these guys that played, in the NBA and so on, who, it's like, what would and they were from Vegas too, right? So it had all these layers to it. And I've always found the big issue, and I'm a big Nassim Taleb fan, is people just don't have skin in the game. People can just say random shit, and then they don't have any skin in the game, and there's no accountability later. And we don't like to hold people account, and it's like bad form, it's poor form, in person especially. So we just let all this slide over and over, and especially in the sports ecosystem, because everyone's like, fire the GM, fire the GM. It's like, okay, well, let's put your 401k on the line and see if you really should fire the GM. And of course, everyone's like, no, you probably don't want to fire the GM. And I just wonder, how much do you think in this modern world, we're on this sort of free ride where we can just say, unlimited anything, including the wildest things. And then eventually some of these people get into power, and then they have to act on it or get stuck by it. And then we're in this weird situation now. And these people aren't really prepared for this. Like, the real answer for the Epstein thing for me is pretty simple. Come forward with a traditional prosecutorial team, like you would like a RICO team, and explain, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is how we'd release it. We're going to go through a group of ex-judges, blah, blah, blah. And you're going to see this sort of evidentiarily laid out.
Aaron, you mean like the Warren Commission? No, I'm kidding.
No, it doesn't have to be that substantial, but there is a procedure to going through this and sorting through it, and having a transparency layer to it that is readable, and then obviously the journalists are the channel this is coming through, and they all have legal reporters, so you invite that pile of legal reporters, kind of the old school kind of Nina Totenberg types of the modern era, and they basically just report it out. Hey, this thing's blacked out because obviously it includes a whole bunch of people who just took a flight and happened to go to a conference, like you said, that happened to be in the same island. And we prove that, hotel records, everything else. And then there's the other 3 people there. Well, those are ones we're digging into. And so I'm wondering, how much is this a lack of modern competence and looking back at old ways that we used to do things?
I wish. I just don't think that's what it is. I think people are going to find a way given the information channels we have, the technology, and your very logical and transparent idea, which sounds good, I just don't think is going to make much of a dent in the problem. You said a lot, though. You said a lot. I want to address all of it.
Sorry.
You've moved me off my Bin Laden as the conspiracy theory.
That's the only thing I really wanted to do. But
you've moved me off that. I'm gonna have to maybe transfer to the Vegas shooter, Stephen Paddock. Perhaps we'll have to look into it. The game you mentioned, the conspiracy theory. Recently, I saw Larry Johnson in an interview. He was in that game, right? I believe.
Yeah. Larry's a baller, dude. He was a monster.
He blamed himself for that loss. He said that he just didn't try hard. He thought they were going to kick the shit out of Duke. Excuse my language. And he just, by the time they started to lose, it was too late. So it's funny. It's sort of, people have a conspiracy theory, but it's this banal reality that Larry Johnson just wasn't really engaged that game. And then, I don't know. I'm like Rick Perry. I can't remember the third. I had a third point. I can't really get to it.
Well, let me add something while you think about it, Ethan. I know we have limited time. I'll be fast. But one of the things about these conspiracy theories is the kind of changing mores of time make you realize that while we think that people who are involved in conspiracies are trying to either minimize or disappear their involvement, there is the past in which the opposite of that is true. I'll give you an example of this. I just did a little brief episode of the Fifth Column with the Stanford professor Abbas Milani about the 1953 coup in Iran, because we're talking about Iran and are they trying to do a coup? And all of these people were coming forward and CNN had a piece on it. Well, we overthrew the government back in 1953. And Abbas Milani, who was an opponent of the Shah, was jailed by the Shah, is an incredible scholar and wrote an amazing biography of the Shah, said, actually, it's not really true. There was involvement, but it's not really true for X, Y, and Z reason. They tried to do a first coup. There was a second coup that America was not. But one of the things that he mentioned to me was the guy on the ground there, Kermit Roosevelt, who was related to Teddy Roosevelt, wrote a book saying he did everything.
Yeah.
Because it was back then, it was great. Like, look at what we can do. We're the Americans. We want to overthrow these guys. It was never considered a bad thing. So the conspiracy theory in a lot of ways comes from his book, in which he's taking credit for a conspiracy that he wasn't really, the mafia, by the way, old mafia trigger guys do the same thing. We did all this stuff. And it's like, actually, you probably didn't. It's like,
by the way, this goes back to the revolution. There's a great series called Turn that came out about 10 years ago, a phenomenal series on AMC. And everyone claimed they were part of the conspiracy to defeat the British, right? And obviously, if all those people were part of it, there wouldn't even have been a Revolutionary War.
Absolutely right.
Like 25,000 people involved, right? So it's like we have these incentives to be cooler and
people want attention. I was the money man for this. I was making this, also people are incredible liars. And anyway, I know Ethan wants to get to one more person before
I'll get to one more person. It's hard. It's hard to stop talking to Aaron. He's a smart guy with great points.
Yeah. He's got a Dodger shirt on. Look at him. He's a good guy.
Let's get Ray Marcano on for our final question. And then I will fly to Las Vegas to see some people for NBA Summer League. Ray, how are you?
Fine. How is everybody? I literally have 30 seconds. So this is perfect.
That's the conspiracy, Ray. You're going to blow the lid off this.
The conspiracy is
Ray, this is Trace. Ray, you've got time. Just do your thing. You've got time. Go on.
A little padding.
Especially if it's the Curt Schilling bloody sock story. That's all I want to hear.
Oh, wow.
It is not it. I have a list here in my hand of what I consider to be the 4 top sports conspiracy theories of all time. I was a sports editor at one point. So here we go. Number 4, Bobby Riggs intentionally loses to Billie Jean King because of his gambling debts. Number 3,
I've heard that,
the Soviet win in 1972 over the USA. Number 2, Jordan did not actually retire the first time. It was a forced suspension by the NBA for his gambling debts.
Wow.
And the number 1 of all time, Ali Liston and the Phantom Punch.
Damn. Man, that's a good list.
That's
God,
a great
Ray.
guest.
Jeez,
Ray.
Can we fire Ethan and make Ray the host of the show? That was.
How dare you? The list had they let some things to be desired. It wasn't a perfect list. No, it's a great job, Ray.
And by the way, to trace, the Schilling bloody sock thing. Look, I know that Curt Schilling became a bit of a villain as a person after the fact, particularly because he took all this money from the government for his, what was it, 38 studios in Rhode Island, where he was like a video game developer and like set it all on fire. And by the way, which is, because he was he's like a famous conservative. It's like the least conservative thing you can do. Get an enormous handout from the government for your own company and then just blow it all. I guess it is actually a pretty conservative thing to do, depending on how you look at it. But the bloody sock thing, I think you're trying to defame the people of Massachusetts and the Red Sox, and I take issue with that. There is no evidence trace of that, and
it's not true.
It's not true. Whatever you're talking about is a lie. You're ridiculous. And I did this. I went to a 4th of July parade this year. And the last time I was there, my daughter and I were walking. It was a very small town. We saw Jason Varitek. So that's very big for us in Boston to see that. In Ray, I was on your side. I said, we're going to give you a job, and you're downvoting me. Unbelievable. Tech was a great catcher. He was no Rich Gedman, but he was a great catcher.
I think the Riggs one is more plausible.
From Yankee Stadium, so.
Oh, I understand.
I think the Riggs one looks more plausible now that we're seeing players throw games over gambling debts currently, as is happening in what we're calling the FanDuel era. I don't know. I don't know much about that one. We might add it to the pile of conspiracy theories I don't believe, but if forced to choose in a crazy hypothetical where a gun is to my head, maybe Riggs. I don't know.
Maybe Riggs.
Maybe Riggs was Riggs.
But he was also like 60. I mean, that's the thing about that tennis match is he was like 100 years old. I mean, come on. I mean, it's like,
what year was that?
Jake Paul. That was the Jake Paul of tennis. You're fighting old guys who were once great. I mean, Bobby Riggs was an old guy at that point. Have her play someone of the exact same age.
What year was that, by the way?
70. What? It was in the Astrodome, right? Wasn't it the Astrodome?
God, yes. That's a magical, just the 70s. What a magical time in the Astrodome. You know, get a middle-aged alcoholic out here to go against the best women's tennis player.
Exactly. That is, I mean, for me, that was the original Jake Paul, right?
Yeah.
I mean, was that a pay-per-view event? Does anyone know if that was
Oh, no, that was on network television.
It was on network television, yeah.
It was 1973. There was no pay-per-view.
Well, when did they start doing closed circuit stuff where you could go to a theater and go to and pay to see something on a closed circuit feed? I don't know when the first one of that was, but
I actually know that it was was the Hagler Hagler Marvin fight. I also, in the many things I've used to do, I've also been a professional boxing judge. But it was Marvin Hagler, Tommy Hearns, first professional closed circuit fight in 1976.
And I think, was Hagler from Massachusetts? I just want to be sure that I think he was from Massachusetts.
Brockton.
He's from Brockton. That's right. There you go. There you go. Always love Marvin for that reason. All right, I know you got to go. So
I know
but that was a great. I appreciate that. Look at that.
I just want to talk to Ray more for the next 45 minutes and just throw more trivia.
But that, Ethan, you understand that's forcing your own obsolescence. I mean that.
Oh yeah, he's like the AI.
When you have a guest that comes on who knows more than you, or a caller that comes,
Yeah.
So.
No, but that happened a few times. You guys were talking about, well, you're so classy. You said Marchand, and our guest said Marchand, like a normie. Hockey. That's a hole in my hole.
Yeah, I mean he's a Canadian, so I mean I shouldn't have it. And not even a Quebecois with that name, which is pretty.
You had two of them. You had Marchand and you had Roosevelt instead of Roosevelt. These markers of class. Michael Moynihan.
Yes. Well, I try to pretend that I'm a class that I'm not, and I am, a low class person from a very fancy town that I was like the poorest person in, which was great. So anytime I make that argument, people will look it up and say, "Oh, you're from Concord, Massachusetts. What a lovely town." And I was like, "No, my dad was in a union and my mom was a secretary. So come on." We mowed the lawns of that town, people.
Salt of the earth, Michael Moynihan. Would love to have you on for longer at some point. Great questions from all of you. Great stuff from you. Hey man, I think I'm supposed to end this. It's very anticlimactic, but I'm supposed to.
Can I end on something that is very important? Someone just popped in the comments and said R.I.P. Schaefer Stadium. My father did work for the Patriots when it was Schaefer Stadium, and I spent my childhood on the visiting team's sidelines. And I have a great picture somewhere of me and OJ when he was I think working for NBC. But yeah, so that's the old. I was Schaefer Stadium. I was a product of Schaefer Stadium. I was born in Schaefer Stadium. So
why isn't that picture next to the Mao statue?
I do have a picture I can send to you now of me and a shirtless Sam the Bam Cunningham, if you want that.
I don't need that. That's okay.
I don't think I need that. I'm trying to get rid of it. So
great stuff, everybody. Thanks so much,
Thank you,
Michael.
Ethan. That was really fun.
Until next time. See ya.